time once again for Community Forum, and we are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Jerrell Davis. Jerrell Davis, also known as Rell Be Free, is a community activist, MC, musician, poet, spoken word artist, and an educator. He is co-founder of the Youth Leadership Development Organization WABLOC, also known as Washington Building Leaders of Change, and a coordinator with Rainier Beach Action Coalition, and one of the co-founders and core members of the Seattle People's Party. Jerrell, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Absolutely. It's a blessing to be here.
So start out, let's talk about your different organizations that you work with. Start out with WABLOC. Tell us about that.
WABLOC is an organization. So by the way, just start, I'm from the south end of Seattle. That's one thing I always got to let people know. I'm from the south end, Seattle, Rainier Beach, Beacon Hill, Rainier Valley, all that. WABLOC is an organization that, with a table of young folk, as well as young folk that work at the school. A couple years back, there was some institutional barriers with another organization that we were organizing through at the school. And we had to make a decision. You know, basically they cut a summer program that we had just piloted that had a huge impact. And they had just cut the summer program, obviously without telling us. And so we had a challenge in front of us whether or not we were going to keep the work going. Plus, it's, talking about the livelihood of college kids that, rely on that for their summer income, as well as young folk that have a resource that go to the school that want the program, families. And so we had to make a decision. And there was a table full of young folk that were in the program, obviously the folk that was working there. And we made a decision like, okay, in order for us to do the summer program, we're going to have to create some sort of, nonprofit just so at least we can do it and then make moves from there. And so that was very organic beginning. And from then, we continued doing the summer program, CDF Freedom Schools at Rainier Beach, and started doing year-round programming at the school, working in the classroom with teachers, doing teacher trainings, working with administration, wound up getting the contract at Rainier Beach, and continuing. Since then, we've been doing summer program as well as working during the school year. And so it's dope because everything we do is not just student-centered, but, young folk are participating in the organizing. Whether we're talking about hiring young folk, trying to provide opportunities, we really try to make sure it's organic. And whenever we feel like we're getting away from that, then it's time to circle up and really sit down and make sure that we're going in the direction that we need to be. Because at the end of the day, we talk about work that is being done in a certain community. It needs to have the folks that the work is for, who's doing it with them. And so we have to do it with young people, not for young people. You see what I'm saying? And in Rainier Beach, it's a neighborhood that's, the city's always been messing with Rainier Beach. And it's always been under-resourced. However, that's where the brilliance is. That's where a lot of the best ideas come from. And one of the examples is the Orca Card program that the city just pushed. That originated, we were there, we started that. We did, the young folk decided what's a major issue that's a plague in our neighborhood, that's plaguing young folk here. And they said transportation, they connected transportation woes to graduation. And from all that, we did a march from the John Stanford building, Seattle Public Schools main office, to Predator Murray's office, which is about 2 miles. Did that march on a 98-degree day. It was mostly young folk, like I said, the high schoolers from Rainier Beach, and then even our elementary school site. And they were pushing for the Orca cards. I still think everybody under 18 and everybody over 55 should get a free Orca card. Sound Transit has enough money. City of Seattle has enough money. They just being selfish and stingy. And so we kept the organizing up, did town halls in Rainier Beach, at the high school, and then that translated into Jenny Durkin and them wanting to, hijack the program. And now, over 3,000 young folk all across the city, from Ballard to the South End, get an Orca card just for being a student. And that's something that young folk initiated, originated, and really when you center neighborhoods and young folk and people like Rainier Beach, the benefit will be exponential Because if it's going to do something positive for Rainier Beach, it's going to be positive in the neighborhoods that are affluent. But if you center the affluent neighborhoods, a lot of times that stuff's not going to reach. You know what I'm saying? The trickle-down economics we know is a farce. Like, we know that does not work. It's literature all about it. And so it's Wall Block is I wouldn't say it's an experiment, but it's an operation that does have a purpose that's being served. And I liken myself to Ella Baker, who was one of the co-founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Was also one of the co-founders of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and a host of other very radical, very powerful organizing efforts in the South in the 60s. I'm not necessarily so tied to an org as I'm tied to the work, as I'm tied to what needs to be done. I mean, right now, Wall Block is, and my crew of folk, shout out to Jordan and Darzell, Laura, Miriam, Zion, Chelsea, James, Julia. There's so many people. Ifra, like, I can't even name all of them. Ryan Kroom, the young folk. There's so many people that have impacted this, and they all know who they are. All the Freedom School staff and team that's been rocking with us, all the supporters. Right now, this is the body that's really making the impact. And so, you know, I'm honored to be doing the work. It ain't easy because partnering with the school district, you know what I'm saying, sucks, to be honest. They ain't got their stuff together. And so that part's definitely difficult, a lot of the institutional, logistical stuff. Right now at Rainier Beach, what our main focus is restorative justice. In the last couple of years, shout out to Afama Yika, who really piloted what restorative justice coordination could look like at Rainier Beach for us. And we were able to parlay his very tough experience catching shots from administration, and just like being able to see the wealth of work that's needed at a high school level to have restorative justice, like not just integrated into the discipline practices, but to be shifting how discipline is done. And so that's what we've been doing. We've hired 2 restorative justice coordinators, only school in Seattle Public Schools that has restorative justice coordinators in the school. And mind you, the school's not doing it. This is a community-based organization bringing it in. But really trying to shift the discipline practices at the school, because we talk about school to prison pipeline, and the disciplinary practices of a school are directly tied to the school to prison pipeline, because what you're doing is you're modeling behavior in class, behavior outside of class in the neighborhood that gets connected to the school. It's modeled, the way that they interact with it is modeled after the prison industrial complex. It's very punitive. It sends students right there, right to the jail they build in, you know what I'm saying, on 12th and Alder. And so it's powerful work that's being done. But anytime there's powerful work, there's always going to be some barriers. And so we just going to keep fighting. And it's all for the good, all to the good.
So you're replacing the criminal justice model that is commonly used in the schools to restorative justice.
Yeah, I mean, we're aiming to do so. You know what I'm saying? It's a fight to do so because, as Frederick Douglass said, you know, power doesn't just concede willingly. You know, you're going to have to force it. You're going to have to put pressure on it. And so whether we're talking about, you know, school administration or Seattle Public Schools, or even then the main thing is really just like the structure, the systemic barriers that make real transformational change difficult. Like we're talking about policy, we're talking about protocol, you know what I'm saying, that any one person would say, oh, well, you know, like that's just the way it is, you know, and then displacing the blame, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're fighting the institution. And that's what institutional racism, the structural elements of this stuff is like all about, is that, you know, there's the individual micro, you know, stuff. We're talking about the face-to-face elements, but then a lot of it is the policy level, the system change that's necessary. And so we're looking to build structure. We got a 3-year grant to be able to do this. And we're looking to have, you know, year 1 goals, year 2, year 3, and really build up a new system and structure, because it's not like, it ain't for us. It's not for the sake of the people that's doing the work. You see what I'm saying? Like it's for the sake of our young folk having conflict resolution models for themselves to use in their own friend group, community, school, as well as other schools. It's Rainier Beach ain't the only school in Seattle Public School District. Seattle Public School District ain't the only school with punitive discipline practices. And so we do have opportunities to connect with other schools that are looking to do the same thing. And we believe it should start with the students. Student power, young folk power is the youth inherit the revolution, and we got to pass it to them, and we got to give them the platform and the right tools to be able to do so.
You also were one of the co-founders and core members of Seattle People's Party. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and does it have any plans for working with the schools or getting people on the school board and changing that model?
Yeah, shout out to the People's Party, everybody. Yeah, it's love, and that's one thing I gotta say about the People's Party. It's so organic, like we're all friends. You know what I'm saying? Like outside of the organizing, it's like it's homies. And I think that's the best kind of organizing spaces. Is when it's folks that you legitimately, genuinely love. And that's the only spaces I be in between Wall Block, Corner Greeters, Seattle People's Party, like music. Like I don't spend time with people I almost cuss. I don't spend time with people I don't rock with. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to the People's Party. Yeah, it just started out very organically. And we do have plans to definitely support the school system, and not necessarily the school system. The thing about the People's Party is this. It's a variety of organizers that represent and organize in different communities, and there's a bunch of overlap between us. And our intention is not to be directing what organizing looks like in Seattle. That's not the intention at all. Ain't nobody trying to tell people how to organize. It's not at all what we're building this for. But to really create a platform and a collective body where we can provide education on analysis for everybody, where we can just like bring community together, fellowship, as well as learn and grow together, but really talking about collective power. If we don't have a vehicle, essentially, if we don't know how to put our fingers together, we ain't never gonna have a fist. And the attempt of what we're doing with the People's Party is to really ball up that fist, get people activated, get white folk activated in their own neighborhoods. A lot of times white people want to like join like our movement and then slowly but surely want to be in the forefront. You know what I'm saying? We can talk about a whole bunch of different organizing actions that has turned into that, not just in Seattle, but really encouraging folk, and that comes down to your analysis, really encouraging folk to organize in their communities and then click up with the other communities where there's overlap, where there's the consistencies, and then just supporting each other. And so definitely, like I work in the schools, Nikita works in the schools, Darzell works in the schools, a number of other folk like work with young people in different capacities. Shout out to Yin. I want to name everybody, and I probably will in the course of the conversation. But people working with young folk, absolutely. When it comes to like the school system, you said running for school board. But I want to talk about that because school board is the only elected, to my knowledge, the only elected position that's not funded. Like you have to be a volunteer to be on school board, and to be a good school board member, you got to spend a lot of time, and so you can see who are the people that have the privilege to be able to do so. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna comment on like who that is in regards to, but because we know who the school board is, and it's never reflected us. And you might have one black person on the school board, you got one indigenous person, and you got, a white woman that may speak Spanish, you know what I'm saying? But that ain't diversity. That ain't what we need. They ain't representing the interests of the majority of kids that are in Seattle Public School District that are failing, you know what I'm saying, whose schools are failing. So, what the election illuminated even more, that we already know, our communities already know that the government don't care about us. Like we know that. It's not even like it's a debate, like, oh, let's sit and tell me how it cares. Like, no, like we know what it is. But what it really showed was just the hypocrisy, the bigotry, in how it operates, and saying, yes, like people would literally, other candidates would say, we need more black women in office. Well, why the hell are you running against the one black woman that's running? Shout out to the couple other black women, pardon me. Why are you running against black women that are running right now? If you really believe that, step out the way. What are you doing? You're taking votes for no reason, and especially with no agenda or expectation of actually winning. And it's funny because people really didn't, I don't know. I knew that we were going to make a wave. We were less concerned about, our mindset wasn't fully on winning. We weren't like, oh yeah, let's win the mayorship, because if you win, you got to be mayor. You got to be politicians now. Of course, like we would not do it the same, and we would like to say that. But some people could say that's the benefit in us not winning, was now we ain't got to, be a part of the machine, the American killing machine, the imperialism machine that's plaguing our city. But at the same time, we were able to change the conversation. Everything that was our platform, I'm telling you, from the meetings we had when we laid out our substantive areas and the issues that we wanted to bring up just on our platform, those issues that we wrote down and we got the documents to prove it became exactly what the race was about, because everyone else had to shift their conversation to that. And the reason why is because we were a group of organizers that weren't just representing the interests of folks, but we are the community we're talking about. We're talking about folk that are facing displacement because they're getting pushed out the city. We're talking about folk who are part of the LGBTQI community that are getting persecuted and harassed and oppressed. And we're talking about young black folk in the city that find it extremely hard to be in Seattle. We're centering the folk who were elevating and were doing that work with us, doing listening parties all across the city with all different groups, from the differently abled community to the Latinx community, to the East African community, to the African American community, people, y'all need to know, we did hella organizing in the North End. Seattle People's Party. Shout out to the volunteers, to all the districts, because over 1,100 folk were activated throughout the city, and that's throughout all of Seattle. People throwing house parties, and not just like 90s house parties, but like house parties where we're actually having like conversation about where the city's, how it's transforming. So it was a enriching experience, but then also hella frustrating. But, just kind of confirmation that Seattle is a city in the United States of America, capitalistic, heteropatriarchal, anti-black as hell. And it was just very obvious. And so to me, I'm surprised how people are even still talking this like progressive, like I don't see it. I'm just confused, because I'm like, man, if you're any like kind of basic social studies student, you can see what Seattle represents. And so I think that the People's Party, we're interested in not this like, it's not about gradualism, but we really are talking about some transformative mentality shifts that need to take place, radical action, and as we've always said, really shifting the material conditions of the people that we're centering, that are centered, changing the material conditions, because that's what it really looks like. And shout out to all the different organizations that preceded us, because none of this, and Wall Block as well, nothing I do is just like ex nihilo, out of nothing. We're definitely on the shoulders of our elders, of a lot of black queer women that set the way and took a lot of shots before we could step into any position. And so we definitely got to pay homage to that and those people, because, we wouldn't have these opportunities if it wasn't for folks that are very, unknown. Shout out to KL, that are very unknown, that people don't give credit or credence to, that set the way. And so I always want to make sure that I shout out and recognize those that came before, who prepared us, whether we knew it or not.
So talk a bit, you touched on the youth jail, touch on that, and also talk about the recent public community get together regarding the Seattle police proposal to ramp up putting SWAT members into the CD.
Shout out No New Youth Jail. It's a movement, and to be honest, like there's plenty of other people that are better suited to be telling this story. Because in 2012 I was not there at the forefront. Shout out to all the folk that started the No New Youth Jail movement and have continued the work. And so the No New Youth Jail movement is really centered around this idea of the youth jail. And it's not just about the jail on 12th and older, of which they're putting over $200 million into to build new cages. And what they say, you could say plush cages. They want to, they try to explain it. Oh, it's a youth and family center. We got to renovate it so it's nicer. Put some computers in there. Look, you're putting more beds. And when you put more beds, you want to get people in those beds. And to get more kids in beds means more kids got to leave a schoolhouse. There's no way you're telling me that you're building this place to benefit young black and brown kids that are going to be put in there. If you're going to benefit them, put that $200 million towards the schools that are getting shut down. Put that $200 million towards the food deserts that they living in. Put that $200 million towards resources for their families so they don't got to feel like they have to go to Safeway or QFC and take some food to feed their family. You know what I'm saying? And so the youth jail, to me, I think it just illustrates people's pedagogy and how they see society. You know what I'm saying? Because people always want to say, well, what about the big crimes? Y'all talk about restorative justice. Y'all talk about, you know what I'm saying? Y'all talk about alternatives to policing and alternatives to imprisonment and incarceration. And they always want to throw the big crimes at it. To my knowledge, a very small percentage of the crimes are the extremely violent crimes. And so imagine people, and this is like from a sociological perspective, people always assume and think that the crime rates are higher than they actually are. And this is a global phenomenon. Everywhere on earth, people think the crime is higher than it actually is. And that's that's fear mongering. That's what they want you to do. That's what propaganda does. They want you to believe that, things are happening more often than it really is. And that's not to say it's not. Because even the things that are done that are considered quote unquote crimes are reactions based on decisions, based on the conditions that people are living in. You see what I'm saying? And if you break it down to its rawest form, it comes down to decisions and what are the opportunities and conditions that folk are living in that puts these decisions right in front of them to be able to choose from. And if we improve our neighborhoods, we improve communities, we improve the livelihood of folks, then all of that fades away. And so with that pedagogy of understanding that investing in a youth jail, that's not preventative. It's not even really intervention, because we know recidivism is extremely high. You know what I'm saying? Plus 60% folk end up going back for the same thing. And we also know the money that's in the prison industrial complex. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know what I'm saying? And so when we talk about no new youth jail, we're not just saying don't build them cages, which if you've seen, they've been building that mug up with the quickness. It looks like a fortress, right there in the middle of a neighborhood in the CD. It looks like a fortress. And Dan Soderbergh's punk ass, Dow Constantine's punk ass, like and just continuing to, and I call them out because they are people that can move the dial. They are people who have influence on what happens here. You know what I'm saying? And they've been people that have consistently dodged community. The People's Party, just this past Sunday, we just hosted a forum that Dan Soderbergh originally committed to coming to. Darren Morrison had to drop out of the race. And then Dan Soderbergh sent his little lackey to tell us that he's not going to come because he's not doing no more community showings. This is a community of folk that may have voted for you. I know that they probably didn't, but at the same time, these are people in your jurisdiction that you owe your time to, that you need to come and sit down and listen to them. And he chose not to show up. And it wasn't surprising. We're not surprised when the system and the conduits of the system do that kind of stuff. But going back to No New Youth Jail, and the organizing effort that was a few weeks ago at Washington Hall, and that wasn't necessarily specifically young folk. That was a wide array of community members, and that was just in the interest of this over policing of our young folk. And it's not just our young folk; it's of the neighborhoods. More violent crime happens on Capitol Hill than in South Seattle. 7 days a week. You know what I'm saying? But Capitol Hill ain't over policed. They ain't got SWAT cars in Capitol Hill the way they do on Rainier and Henderson. They don't got SWAT cars, over there in Belltown, and the way they got SWAT cars, going by Garfield High School, on 23rd or Union. And these are places that used to be like super blocked up. But they colonize in our neighborhoods again. And so when it comes to the SWAT being brought, they're saying, okay, it's spikes and drive-bys. It's a lot of shooting happening. I'm going to go back to it, man. What are the conditions people are living in? Yep. What are the conditions people are living in? Y'all putting people in situations where they have to make decisions like this. Plus, don't try to act like we out here getting the guns. Where these guns coming from? We ain't the ones bringing them in. That's what I got to say about that.
All right, we're talking with Jerrell Davis, also known as Rell Be Free. And how can people support your work and find out more about your work?
Like me individually?
Or the projects you're involved with?
Yeah. So I'm an MC as well. You can go check me out, Rell Be Free, RELLBE Free. That's everything. You can just Google it. Support the music. I got a lot of music coming soon as well. To support the work, check out WABLOC, WA-BLOC.org, SeattlePeoplesParty.com. People's Party, we just lifted our membership. And so people can come and apply to be members of the People's Party. And that really, like I said, is an organizing effort to bring people together and elevate what this collectivism looks like. And we want people to have an input in that. It's not like about our making the decision for it, but we really are trying to be collective. Instagram, pay attention, yo. It's not too hard. There's a lot of stuff going on in the city, a lot of organizer efforts, a lot of dope folk who are not me that are doing amazing things that I got to give like much homage and respect to. Peace to all the ladies. The queens are running the city right now, and they're not at the forefront of the media because the media wants to, is patriarchal as hell. They want to, suppress that. But I want to make sure we elevate that. A lot of folk doing a lot more work than me, sweating a lot more than me that I got to acknowledge.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Holla, y'all. Be free.